It's another beautiful day here in Lake Tahoe on June 18th, 2024. Today's guest is Mike O'Brien, an engineer turned businessman who has spent most of his career working in the aerospace and defense industry. He's spent time leading an area of Northrop Grumman, one of the largest defense contractors in the U.S., and he's started Advanced Countermeasure Systems and was appointed CEO of Valley Tech Systems, both of which were acquired by other aerospace and defense companies. The latter, Valley Tech Systems, was acquired by Voyager Space, where Mike now serves as president of the Defense Systems segment. Mike, welcome to Tahoe Minds.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me.
So let's just get started by what exactly you do. I know you can't say everything because it is the defense sector, but right now, as president of the Defense Systems segment at Voyager Space, what is it that you do? Do you oversee? Is it more of an advisory role?
No, I actively run the defense segment. When I say actively run, I interact with the leadership team and regularly and customers regularly. So I make sure that we understand customer requirements and we pursue business opportunities the way I believe we should pursue them. And then once that work is brought in-house, that we execute the work in a way that I believe the customers need the work executed. So I'm fairly involved on a day-to-day basis. I have a really good team, so I don't have to be, I guess, overly involved, but I do stay pretty actively involved. It's not really like a advisory role. It's a hands-on management role.
Got you. And how did you get started in the defense sector, working for the government? Did that start right out of college or?
It did. It was not really a conscious choice on my part. It was, I graduated with a degree in electrical engineering and interviewed on campus. I went to school in San Luis Obispo at Cal Poly, and they had a really good recruiting kind of setup for engineers. And I interviewed at several companies and got a job offer in the Bay Area working for a defense company, and really didn't think too much about it. Just thought, this sounds like an interesting job, I'll take it. So I immediately went into the defense area, not really understanding that it was so different from commercial or other business area or other market segments. So just kind of fell into it, and then liked doing that work and stuck with it.
Gotcha. And did you work at Northrop Grumman before or after you started that first company?
I actually started a small business in Santa Clara, and then I left that company for another small business that was in the Sacramento area. And that business had some challenges associated with it. After I had been there for 10 years, that second business I was at was really struggling, and the venture capital investors decided it was time for them to move on and focus on bigger things that were producing more dollars for them. And so I wound up buying that company, the second company, when I was in my 30s from the VC group. Ran that, grew that, sold that. Then I went to work for Northrop Grumman, just because I knew people there. It was TRW at the time, being acquired by Northrop Grumman, and then I stayed there for about 10 years, and then ultimately left there to be part of today's company, VTS.
Gotcha. And for those of us who don't know, what is TRW?
Oh, it was a large defense contractor,
okay.
Just not nearly as large as Northrop Grumman.
Yep. And
it was Sunnyvale based. The part of the organization that did all of the science and technology development for the DoD was located in Sunnyvale. So they had started there, and they also had a big footprint in Redondo Beach. Okay. So a pretty big company.
Got you. And can you talk a little bit more about that story of how you bought that company in your 30s? Did you have a lot of cash on hand, or what happened?
Yeah,
and what was the thinking behind it?
Yeah, I had. It was interesting, as a younger. I was probably in my mid 30s at the time, and it was clear to me the company was, I don't want to say going out of business, but I'll just say going out of business. The VC guys, they kept putting money into it, and that's not what they want to do, right? They want to put some investment in. They expect a certain return in a certain amount of time, and they weren't getting it out of this company. And so they had gone through a series of presidents, and it wasn't working out, and it created a lot of stress for the employees. It was a small business, less than 20 people at the time, and what they wanted to do was basically walk away from the company. But they had a lot of contingent liabilities, rent, and they had to pay employee termination. They had some assets in the bank, but not enough to cover all the liabilities that they'd incur if they closed the business down. So I worked with, they made it clear at some point they were going to close the business down, and I saw that as an opportunity. Most employees saw that as the end of the game, and they were literally packing their bags, getting ready to leave the company. And some of these folks were 20 years my senior, much more seasoned, much more experienced than I was, and they saw this closure as the end, and they thought it was a huge risk to try to position to buy the company from the venture capitalist group, whereas I saw it as an opportunity. Now, maybe it was because I didn't have much to lose, right? I didn't have 20 more years of assets that I've accumulated, like my house, or I didn't have to put a lot of risk, and so I negotiated a deal with the board, and I was able to convince them to take essentially pennies on the dollar for their investment, and I would assume the business along with all of the liabilities, and they were pretty happy to get out from under it. Once I negotiated a deal, the guys at work with me that didn't want to risk anything all of a sudden changed their mind. They started to want to risk things, and I told them, hey, it's too late. I've got a deal structured. I wound up giving the key employees stock options, but the bottom line was I didn't have the money, and I had to come up with $100,000, which to me in like 1995 was a lot of money. And so I was fortunate enough to have a brother who was a professional athlete who had money. And so I called him and said, hey, how about I got a deal for you. And so I asked him if I could borrow some money from him to buy the company, and then told him I'd pay him back within a week, because oddly enough, the company had cash in the bank, which I could use to return the funds to him, and I give him, a good little bump on top of that, So that's what we did. He loaned me the money. I wrote the check, and then paid him back in a week, and so it really didn't cost me anything other than I was assuming all the liabilities the business had, which is exactly what the venture capitalist guys did not want to do. So it worked for them. It worked for me.
Got you. Yeah. So you bought the company with your brother's money, and then paid him back with the cash that the company still had on hand.
That's correct.
That's insane.
Yeah. Worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I guess so. So. And did you have any prior business experience? How did you know how to structure deals or negotiate with these people?
I really didn't. One of the board members was a very senior, experienced investor type, and he took a liking to me. Well, at least I think he did. He was either took a liking to me or he was trying to stick me with the business. But I think he took a liking to me and wanted the business to survive. And he was eliminating the liabilities for the investors. So I think from his perspective, the investors were going to get nothing anyways. And so why not help somebody who's trying to make this thing survive? So he helped me structure the deal. I trusted him. It turned out to be a good thing for me. But I had experience in managing the business, parts of the business, never as the president, but as like a program manager and a group manager. I understood how the business worked. I understood the customers. I understood, in general, the finances. But I really didn't have any business experience per se. I just didn't have any. But I got a lot of it pretty quick.
Gotcha. And what do you think made the company succeed after you got? I mean, you already said it was a failing company. It was probably going to go out of business until you bought it.
Yeah.
And then it was acquired later. What do you think you brought to the table that really that the previous board or CEO or president did not have?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I can tell you what I think. I think that the perspective I always bring is customer first, and a lot of people say that. A lot of companies say that, and they don't all mean it. They say it because it sounds good. But we immediately went to the customers, explained to them what happened with the change in ownership of the company, and we just had great relationships with our customers at the working level, but not necessarily at the management level prior to me buying it. And the customers understood what was happening and accepted it. It put some more risk on them because now we were a smaller ownership group and our pockets were not as deep as they were before. So in order to execute programs, sometimes you need more dollars. So even though it was maybe a little more risky for them to stick with us in the future, they did. And we grew the business. When I say we, me and the leadership team, grew the business significantly over the following, 4 or 5 years. And so why? I think because we stayed really focused on what the customer needed. The customer saw us make investments of our own in getting work done for them without asking for extra dollars. So they really started to believe that we were doing things in their best interest. And I think that philosophy is 100% true today for me at my current business. It's you always put your customer first, and you make real investments in their well-being and the results that you give to them. And sometimes it hurts you financially in the short term, but long term it pays off. And that's worked for me throughout my career.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And sorry, before we continue also, who were the customers exactly? Was it the government? Was it a sector of the government? Was it a private company?
It was, we had a combination of customers. We had some contracts directly with the U.S. government. At that time, it was the Army was our main customer. We had some small contracts with what I'll call three-letter agency type organizations. And then we did some work for prime contractors as well. So we would some of the large primes like Raytheon and companies like that. So it was a combination of customers.
Got you. And what did scaling the company look? Did your hours shoot up after you bought the business, or did they stay pretty stable?
Yeah, they increased. I think most of the time the increase in hours had to do with travel. I had to travel. When you run a company in California, most of your customers, in my business, most of your customers are out of state. Most of them are on the East Coast. And so you wind up traveling a lot to be with the customer at certain times. And so, but the day-to-day work was focused on, pretty much focused and remained. It was still about a 40-hour-a-week job, but then you add the travel and it becomes, 3 days or 4 days a week. Out of every 2-3 weeks, you might be gone. So it takes away a lot of your personal time, but it's just part of the, it's part of the equation. So in terms of personal time that I had to dedicate or others had to dedicate, we tried to keep a balance. We did not want to be in an organization where we had to work 100 hours a week or 80 hours a week consistently, maybe once in a while, but we all wanted to enjoy our lives as well. So we tried to keep that balance.
Gotcha. And do you think that was probably the biggest challenge, the long commute and making sure that your customers' well-being is satisfied?
I think so. I think, I think for the type of business that I'm in, and I'm sure different for other businesses, you have to really stay close with your customer, and they have to believe you are doing the right things for them. And so having a personal relationship is important. A lot of organizations will tell you it's not important. It's not a personal relationship that gets you in the position you want to be in. I completely disagree with that. You have to have people who trust you, people who believe in you long term, and not just you as an individual, but the organization you're with. And so staying close to customers is very important in my business.
Gotcha. And what do you think the biggest difference between, you said that you had some private customers like Raytheon. What do you think the biggest difference between maintaining relationships with government agencies versus a private company was?
It's similar, but it's harder to maintain them with government employees because government employees are very conscious about mixing personal and professional responsibilities together, and a lot of ethics violations that could occur. And so you have to be very careful, and they have to be very careful. If you understand the rules and you're respectful of the rules, it works. When you deal with other private companies, there's a little more flexibility. This is a very regulated, DoD industry is a very regulated industry, and it's very clear what you can and can't do. And we know the rules, and our customers know the rules, both government and private company customers. And you want to play by those rules, and we do. But I would say the government has an extra eye of scrutiny on them and an extra set of rules that they have to deal with. And you have to make sure you don't put them in an uncomfortable position. You have to understand those rules. You can't take them on vacations. You can't do things that maybe private companies outside the DoD world can do. You just can't do those kind of things. And so you have to navigate those relationships carefully, so you don't violate kind of ethical conduct rules, or you don't put your customer in an uncomfortable spot.
Got you. And you briefly mentioned regulations. Was it more difficult designing and producing and selling this equipment to the government because of their stricter regulations than it was to private firms, or because the private firms were also regulated by the government, it was pretty similar?
It was pretty similar. The rules applied, and they would do what they call flow down. They would just flow down whatever requirements they had. They would just flow down to us in a subcontract.
I see. And if you could briefly talk about what types of devices you were selling, if you can.
Yeah. So we sold at the first company that I wound up buying. We designed and developed communication jamming devices. So devices that would interfere with communications of an adversary, and for different purposes. So that was really interesting work. We also built some hardware for the U.S. Army for training purposes, where they would do simulated battles, and we instrumented equipment, soldiers and vehicles with laser systems to simulate whether you'd been hit by a weapon, what type of weapon, what type of damage that would cause. Would it disable you? Would it disable your weapons? So it was a set of training tools, that hardware that we built and delivered. Current company I'm at, VTS, now part of Voyager Space, like you said, we build signals intelligence equipment that goes on aircraft. So Army, Air Force, other aircraft that fly near adversarial territory will intercept ground-based emissions and locate those signals and pass that data along to the to the intel community for purposes of targeting high-value targets, or trying to locate targets of interest. We also build very different, but we build roll control systems and attitude control systems for missiles and rockets. So using solid rocket propellant. So I have at the current company, two really different business areas, kind of almost like two small companies within a company. So,
Got you. And what does obtaining government contracts look like? Are there bidding wars between all these different manufacturers that are trying to give the government the lowest price for the best product, or how does that work?
Yeah, the government typically will publish requests for proposals, and you are typically going to compete for those, at least early on during a program. And they can be classified, they can be unclassified. If they're classified, you have to have the right security clearances to even bid on them. But, what we do is we work with customers, we understand when their requirements are developing and when they're going to come out with requests for proposals. They will publish the criteria they're going to use to evaluate your proposal. And it could be low cost, it could be schedule, it could be technical capability. So you just need to understand what they're asking for and how they're going to evaluate you. And they put that in the request for proposal. They'll tell you how they're going to evaluate you, and you then make a decision. Hey, can I win? Can I win on the basis of low cost? Many times you can't. You say, no, there's a couple other low cost companies out there. I'm not even going to bid this. Or if you think you can win, then of course you would bid it. So it's a pretty structured set of kind of business pursuit practices that we follow, very similar to the large primes, very similar process. We're in general going after smaller awards and competing with smaller businesses, not the large primes. So I wouldn't say there's bidding wars, but there's known criteria that you bid against, and you make your decisions on.
Okay. And about how many companies are competing for a given contract, or does it really depend on how big it is?
In general, you'll get a half dozen. Now, sometimes you'll see just 2 or so. Other times you'll see 25, but in general, you're competing with half dozen. You should know who they are. Okay. You need to understand what your competition is doing. Sometimes you wind up teaming with other companies because they bring something to the table different than what you bring. So you kind of strategically develop the relationships. You may compete against them in one opportunity and team with them in the next. Wow. So there's a lot of that happens in the defense industry pretty frequently.
And so how do you manage the relationship with your competitors? You want to stay on pretty friendly terms with almost everybody, it sounds like?
Yeah, you do. It's a very, very professional. I mean, you're going to compete, and you're going to win, and you're going to lose, and they're going to do the same thing. And you just have to look at every opportunity individually and say, hey, I'm better off teaming with them, or I'm better off competing with them. And it's very rare, but it does happen where somebody goes on your no bid list, meaning you won't partner with them but that's generally because you don't trust them. And there are businesses everywhere that you just don't trust the leadership team in, including in defense. And so some businesses have a reputation of winning a job and then trying to displace you. Other businesses have just some concerns. Well, you're concerned with their ethical behavior, and so they'll go on your no bid list. And we have very few of those, but there are few, but very few. Most of the time, it's just what is going to win this job. How are we going to win this job? And you don't bid with them because you like them or they're really, really good people. You bid with them because it's going to increase your probability of winning that job. And you're better off getting, let's just say, half the work with a much higher probability of win than maybe none of the work. So we'll do that pretty frequently.
Got you. And taking just a step back, you talked about some contracts being classified and some being unclassified. How do you get the security clearance as a private company in order to obtain those classified
it's
contracts?
a little tricky, because it's a little bit of a chicken and egg. And what I mean is that if you don't have one, how do you get one? And you can't get a classified contract if you don't have a facility clearance, and you can't get a facility clearance unless you have a contract that says you need a facility clearance.
Okay.
So typically, there are ways to do it, and we did it through a cooperative research and development agreement with the Air Force. So this is a contract where we're doing research and we're sharing the research with them. They're not funding us, but what it does is it allows them to sponsor us for a clearance. And what they get out of it is they get the results of our research. We share that with them, and we try to apply that towards programs or needs that they have. So they get to understand your technology and work with you to figure out how to apply it to programs. And then ultimately that leads to funded programs for us. You could also have a capability that you could have no clearance, but a capability that could be applied in an area that requires a security clearance to be involved with. And the government could recognize that, and they can make a decision to say, because of this technology, we want your organization to get a security clearance. We'll put in place a contract with you, and we'll identify what clearances you need, and we'll sponsor you for that.
Is it a pretty much a one-size-fits-all? Once you get the security clearance, is it pretty easy to get all of these classified contracts, or are they pretty individualized?
They're pretty individualized.
Okay. And so every time you need to go through another verification process.
Yeah, the clearance just enables you to have access to bid on jobs. The jobs don't, nothing's ever guaranteed. You still, other companies with the same clearances are going to be pursuing the jobs that you want to pursue. So it's still a very competitive environment.
Yeah. And once you win that contract, is it pretty certain that you're going to be working there? What's the success rate you think after you already have won the contract?
Yeah. So if you have a new customer and you win a contract with them and you deliver on time, under budget, on budget, and you meet the technical requirements, it's likely that you're going to get, they're gonna favor you a little bit in the future. They still can't just give you contracts. They still have to compete those contracts. And when they go do that, a lot of times they'll put in their evaluation criteria for the next award a factor called past performance. And they'll rate you on your past performance. And if your past performance is good, that works in your favor for the decision. Sometimes when you win a contract, a different, better way is some of the contracts we have, you win only the design phase. So you'll win the design phase of a program, and the government may award multiple design phases to multiple companies. And then they compare the results, and they say, we like company A's design better, and we're going to now go to production with company A, and company B, you're done. And so if there's a program with a production tail like that, then you start to get in a situation where you become sole source, because you're the only one who can now build that for the government. And so that's really where all defense contractors want to be, is they want to have a mix of programs doing design, but on the other side of the mix, they want production work, because they want to have these sole source production jobs where the government effectively doesn't have to compete those. You've already won the job through your design, and then you go into the production run. And they can't just willy-nilly change, hey, I'm going to change the production from Lockheed to Northrop Grumman. Lockheed's all tooled up for it. They got the personnel, they have the production line. So in a much smaller way, we look to do the same thing. Nowhere near the level of a Lockheed or a Northrop, but we look for jobs that we can get into and then have a production tail on.
What if there's a smaller company that has a really good design, but they just don't have the capital to produce as many units as the government wants? Would that be a time for collaboration between two private companies, or is the IP not really?
No, it absolutely would be. Yeah, like if you need a large capital investment and you can't swing that as a small business, you have a lot of options. You can take, if you have a government contract, you can go take debt, you can go take out a loan, and if you have a contract to back that up, you can pretty easily take out debt. You can also sell some equity in the company, so bring in a financial partner, sell 20% of the company. A lot of times when companies are in that situation, they actually sell to the next size up. So if they're a small company, they'll sell to a mid-tier company, and that mid-tier company would love nothing more than to position themselves for that production run.
Got you.
So there's a lot of things you can do.
I see. And so at that first business that you started, it was pretty small. Did you guys rely a lot on the engineering wit and trying to win those design awards, or how did that? What was the strategic way to scale the business when you're so small?
Yeah, when we were in the smaller businesses, you have to innovate all the time. You really, the government, I mean, if you put yourself in a government employee's seat, they don't like to take risk on anything because they don't want to look bad by making a bad decision and having some contractor fail. So they want to make sure the contractor can execute the job. And so it's very difficult as a small business to convince them that you're able to execute that job low risk. And the way you do that is you have to innovate and provide them with solutions the big companies aren't providing them. And then you have to incrementally demonstrate you're able to produce that product. And they typically won't issue you, for example, a 10-year production run. They may issue you a 1-year production run, and they'll watch how you do. And then they may say, hey, we liked what you did, we'll go to a 3-year. And so that's kind of the game we play. Whereas if you're a defense giant, big company, they may go right ahead, straight to the 10-year job and award that to you.
Yeah, and what's the range of these jobs? Is it usually 1 through 10 years? Is that how?
Yeah, it can be, I'd say 1 year is probably on the shorter end of things. And then if you're doing research and development, absolutely. Could be 6 months, could be a year, could be 2 years. If you're doing production, it's usually going to be 2 to 5 years minimum. But some of those jobs are, they've been around for 30 plus years. Some of the production jobs have been around for a long time. If something's really consumable, you've got to keep producing it on the back end. And so the military will let long-term production awards for those jobs. I've never had a 30-year job. The longest I think I've ever had has been maybe a 5-year production job. So.
And with that first company, did you already have some past performance going in your favor when you were transitioning?
I think so. Yeah, we had some good relationships. We just didn't have. I think it was very difficult at the first company. It was very difficult for the founders because they were really trying to perform in a way that venture capitalists expected. And it's very difficult for defense contractors to grow and scale as quickly as a commercial company. You have a limited number of customers and it limits your growth for the most part. Whereas if you're building iPhones or you're building product that millions of people might buy, you can scale very quickly. And and defense industry is just, it's a little slower. And I think in general hasn't produced the profits and the revenue and profits that venture capitalist investors typically are looking for. Not all VC firms are the same, but that's more often than not.
But does that also usually mean that it's a lot more stable and it's more predictable, and there is, a predictable ARR, we'll say,
Yeah.
that it makes it pretty easy for investors to see what's going on?
It is more stable and more predictable. You can still mismanage a company and go out of business, so you have to have the fundamentals in place, but it is definitely a more stable environment, but it lacks the tremendous upside that a commercial company might see.
For sure. And we'll switch gears a little bit. I would love to hear a little bit more about the balancing innovation with regulatory compliance of the government. How do you manage that? How do you manage those two things, and how do you balance it out as a small company, especially wanting to innovate really quickly?
Yeah, I think the government always needs companies to innovate. The larger companies tend to innovate very well, but they tend to put most of their energy on their big programs where they make most of their money. And you can't blame them, because that's why they're in business. They're publicly traded companies, and they're loyal to their shareholder base. And what we do is we live off of our innovation. I mean, if we don't innovate, we're going to go out of business. And what we do is we try to innovate in areas that we don't see the big companies innovating fast enough. And then we try to introduce solutions really rapidly by working literally with the customers and the user community that needs these things. So if you understand where the need is coming from in the military, and you can connect with those people and you can show them what you can do, they're really interested in getting solutions quickly. That takes a lot of time and energy, and the big companies just in general put their best people on the programs that make them the biggest dollars. And so we put our best people on innovating and trying to get things out to the field quickly. So we do have to innovate to really stay alive. And then within the regulatory environment, everybody that works at the companies, plural, that I've been at, are the lead individuals are all pretty much aware of the regulation and the process you have to go through to validate hardware works, systems work, software works before you field it. So we're all pretty well versed in that. Mm-hmm. And it would probably be frustrating and an obstacle to somebody who came over from the commercial side. Okay. But we already kind of understand it, and so we know how to approach it. They would probably, on the flip side, if we went to the commercial side, they would probably wonder why it's taking us so long, because they don't have to go through the same level of scrutiny that we do.
Got you. That makes sense. And how, just tactically, how do you figure out what the needs are, where to innovate? Does a lot of that information come from the inside, come from your clients, and
it
about
does.
different things?
Yeah, it does. We don't have any, you have to talk to people that are actually, in what I'll call the mission, whatever the mission is.
Yes,
okay?
yes.
So the mission could be collecting signals data. The mission could be serving food in a food line, at a base, military base somewhere. But you have to know what those people could use to make their jobs, to make them more effective at doing their jobs, and protect them. And so you have to understand that, and we do. We, like I said, we stay very close to the customer base, and then we present ideas to them. Probably 3/4 of the ideas go nowhere, but the other quarter of those ideas, they kind of help us or guide us towards some way to adapt that to something that makes sense for them.
I see.
So having those conversations is very helpful to us.
Yeah. And you also talked about how there's pretty strict ethical guidelines when dealing with government or customers in the government. So what does maintaining that relationship look like strategically, knowing that you can't do all of these things that you might be able to do with a private company?
Yeah. So I don't know if I can fully answer that, but I can give you an example. I can say, if we go to a customer and we show them our ideas and they help give us some guidance, they're not giving us any money. They're not giving us any work. They're just saying, hey, if you could adapt this to do the following, that would be something I'm really interested in. Okay? So we go do that. Well, they're still not able to just write us a check, give us a contract. They're going to put out a competitive request for proposal, and we're going to have to bid to that. And, more often than not, if you've worked with the customer for years, you understand their requirements, your proposal is going to be right in line with what their needs are. And other people's proposals aren't, or they're going to be more expensive, or they're going to take too long because they haven't done the initial research like we have. So the example there is, it's still very above board in the sense that, the government can't just give you work because they like you. They've got to put out that RFP, and you've got to respond. You have to have the best proposal, and more often than not, if you have the relationship, you have a good chance of winning those. We've lost some. Even though we thought we were the right guys, we did all the groundwork, we still lost. And sometimes it came down to, we just wrote a crappy proposal. Nobody could understand it. So you're always learning. You're always learning what you can do better. But the relationship has to remain, very above board with the government customers.
And were there any instances where you knew you kind of screwed up and lost the contract, or know of any instances about other companies doing something that wasn't really maybe ethically correct, or like you said, wrote a shitty proposal and it ended up that's why they lost?
Yeah, I know we've written poor proposals and lost because we got too confident in what we thought would win, and we were overly confident, and we didn't take the time to really write a proposal the way it should have been written, and our competition did, and they knew far less than us, but they won. Other times we knew a lot about a certain subject, and we knew how hard it was to solve a certain problem, and our competition didn't, and they won because it was based on cost. And the government, it's up to the government to review that proposal and ask themselves, do they believe that contractor can actually execute that work? And in this particular case, they did believe it, and they awarded the contract to somebody who bid it probably at half the price we bid it. And in the end, they wound up canceling the contract, spending double and canceling the contract. Made me feel good. But the bottom line is, sometimes you just lose things, and it is good to go back and figure out, well, why did we lose it? So the next time around, you understand how to do things better moving forward. And sometimes it's just been lack of focus on our part, too many things going on, and submitting a poor proposal. And
when you started out, you were mostly doing engineering stuff, the design work, but now it seems that you've transitioned to a much more businessy aspect of this area. Which part did you like better? Did you like the engineering part, or do you enjoy the business part better?
I always liked technical things, even as a young kid. I liked technical things, but what I realized pretty early in my career was that I don't want to make this sound the way not intended, but I just grew bored with the detailed engineering work, right? And I found some people that I worked with, peers, didn't grow bored with it, and they got really good at it, much better than me, because they did it And I'm like, how can you keep doing that kind of stuff? Isn't it kind of, you've done it once or twice, but they love doing it, right? And they just got better and better and better. And I really migrated more towards program management, where I was managing the team and developing the schedule and the cost. I still had to use a lot of technical skills, but that's what I really enjoyed probably the most. And then over time, I kind of migrated more into general company management. And I never had a strategic, here's the path I'm going to take. I just kind of did what I liked doing, and I was good enough at it to continue doing it. And some engineers are my age that have been engineers their entire career, and they're excellent engineers. I mean, the amount of expertise, their experience they have, it's incredible. They're so good at doing what they're doing. You couldn't get the projects done without them. But on the other hand, they would never get the projects unless there were people that maybe took a different path than them and were able to go deal with customers. They don't want to deal with, well, I shouldn't say they don't want to deal with customers. They don't want to deal with problems, personnel problems. They don't want to deal with management problems, money problems. They want to focus on the technology, and they can drill down to the lowest level or stay at the highest level. And over time, I wouldn't be able to do what those guys can do at this point.
And so, what advice would you have for people who are more engineering type, more risk averse, more focused on those detailed things, for punching above their weight class in terms of compensation? Because at the end of the day, you were the one that bought the business, you were the one that had the stock options, and you sold it. Yeah. And you probably got paid more than a lot of those people that were much more focused on the technology aspect of it. So what would you say to those types of people in terms of advice for, getting there?
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of ways to be successful in the field of engineering. And I mean, you just look around this community, right? And you're going to talk to a lot of people that probably have engineering backgrounds and stories. I would say that in general, engineers don't want to take a lot of risk, right? It's a bird in hand versus two in the bush. I don't know if you know that saying. That's an old person saying, but they always migrate towards a bird in hand, meaning it's a sure thing. It may only be one instead of two, but it's a sure thing. So they tend to migrate towards that. They're comfortable with it. And I think you can make a really good career as an engineer working for somebody else or a big company, and do just fine. In my part of the world, though, in order to maybe financially be a little more successful, you want to get equity in a business. And so what I've always done is I've always kind of looked at, I think the hardest part of starting and growing a business is getting the work. Doing the work, you can hire people to do it. Getting the work is the hard part. Consistently getting the work and growing the business. And so I think if you're an engineer and you just want that 9-to-5 job and get your paycheck, you can be fine in life. But if you want more financially, you have to find an opportunity to where you get equity in a business. You get some kind of equity. You don't have to be the president. You don't have to be the CEO. You want to be one of the key technologists in that company and get some equity in that business. And a lot of people are paralyzed. A lot of engineers get paralyzed by the thought of leaving the mothership, whatever the mothership is, going into something new, because it might fail. And it might fail, but it also might succeed. And so you have to assess, does this group of people at this startup, new entity, am I confident in them? Do they know the customers? Do they have a way to get business? Can I work with them? And to me, the risk you're taking, this is very different. It's very personal, right? But to me, the risk you're taking is minimal. And the reason I think it's minimal is nobody's dying if things don't go well. If you're a good engineer, you're going to be able to get a job anywhere, any day, almost any day. And so the risk you're taking is you might be unemployed for a while. You might have to work without a paycheck for a little time, a bit of time. But I just think the reward is 10x what you could get working somewhere else.
For sure.
If you have equity. It's probably 100x what you can get if you don't have any equity. But different people view risk differently, and if your risk tolerance is 0, it's not for you.
Yes.
But if you put it in the context of what risk am I really taking, I really see it as minimal risk. You go do it. If you believe in it, you go do it.
Yep.
If it doesn't work out, there's 20 companies you go get a job with within a couple months.
That makes sense.
That's the way I look at it.
Gotcha.
And some people probably don't agree with that, but that's the way I look at it.
For sure. And you quickly skimmed over the fact that a lot of people up here may have an engineering background. I talked to a lot of people up here and the effects that living in Tahoe has on their business and career. Do you think it's also had a positive impact on your business and career?
I do. I think it lets me kind of, living up here, I've met a lot of other people in similar roles at different companies, and kind of it's interesting to learn from them what works, what doesn't work, and it's different sometimes, but you learn a little bit more about maybe the type of role that I've been in, as a president or CEO of companies. You get to meet more people that are similar in that nature, and you can kind of collaborate with them and learn from them, and sometimes find new ways of doing things from just meeting different people. So that's been really good for me. The other thing that's been good is, Tahoe, as opposed to the Bay Area or somewhere like that, you really can kind of decompress, and you can think about things a little bit more. You can think about, it's almost like an automatic stress relief just to be here. Now you're still going to have stress. You still got to do your job.
But it's not always go, go, go.
Right. It's not go, go, go. The only downside is just the travel from Tahoe is harder than it is from the Bay Area or somewhere like that. But I think in general, opportunity to meet people and kind of see how other people do a similar job has been helpful. I think it would also open opportunities if you did want to make a change and go. I've met a lot of people up here. Matter of fact, the business that I just sold to Voyager Space, one of the reasons I could start that business was because I did meet a guy up here who was financially in great shape, and he pushed me to go start the company, and he invested in the company.
Wow.
And so if I didn't know him, that may have never happened.
Wow.
And
wow.
so I got encouragement from somebody who I wasn't asking for it. I wasn't thinking about it, but he was thinking about it, right? And so it was pretty interesting that he believed I could do something that I probably thought I could do as well, but he saw it clearly, like, you need to leave this big company and go do something more meaningful for you. So it worked out for me, and I think for him. So
that makes sense. And I feel like a lot of people that are pretty successful like yourself tend to not really want to retire, and so after you sold that company, Valley Tech Systems, to Voyager Space, you are now working at Voyager Space as president of one of their sectors. What led to that decision? Why aren't you retired instead?
Yeah, I guess at this point I could finally say I could financially retire, but I do enjoy getting. I'm like a results person. I'm not real great with bureaucracy. I'm not horrible with it, but I'm not real great with it. I like smaller businesses that you can kind of make a difference, and I like to get results. I don't care what it is. If I'm working on my yard or I'm, it doesn't matter what it is in life. I like to get results. And I think working, I feel like I'm able to help an organization, move from point A to point B and get results. And so, I probably will continue to work, until I don't really have a retirement date or time or age or anything.
Yep.
It's just I'll keep doing it as long as there's something interesting to do. Voyager right now is on a path to go public. So I want a good group of people, a really smart group of people, different skill sets than me. There are a lot of ex-venture capitalists and investment people, finance people, really smart. They know how to take a company public. I don't necessarily know how to do that, but I know how to run the business, and that's what they want me to do: run the business, and they'll do what they know how to do. So to me, it's still interesting, and I'm learning stuff from them. But I don't know where that takes us, and I don't think they know when they're going to go public. The market has been so, in the last 3-4 years, so kind of crazy that you can't predict when is a good time to go public. But I kind of leave that to those guys to figure out. Yeah.
And wrapping up, I just have one last question for you, which I will ask every guest I have on this podcast. If you could go back and give your 20-year-old self who hasn't quite figured everything out one piece of advice, what would it be and why?
Yeah, that's probably a hard question. I don't think any 20-year-old that I've known of has figured it out.
Yeah.
And I still haven't figured it out. I've just figured out what I know, which is a subset of probably, what I should know. But I would say, have confidence in yourself and pursue what you want to pursue. And you'll know when you like doing certain things, and you'll know when you hate doing certain things. And pursue the things you like. I would say, to me, get really good at something you really like. Learn that job, that industry, and you'll start to see how you could leverage that knowledge into owning a business and running a business. I've seen a lot of people in their career bounce from job to job, industry to industry. Oh, I do pharmaceutical sales. I do, car sales. And they bounce around and they don't get really good at anything. And then they find themselves 50 years old and they really aren't deep in any one area. So I would say early in the career, focus on something you enjoy doing, get really good at it, and that'll position you to be very successful in that area. And once you've had your first success in that area, you can leverage that into new areas. But I think this may be completely different than advice you get from other people. Yeah. I just think bouncing around is wasting time because you're not gaining seniority and knowledge of a certain industry. There's guys who have done it and been ultra successful. Like you look at Elon Musk, he's gone cars, he's done rockets, but he's rare. Okay, he's very rare, right? But I would say in general, just don't get discouraged. Focus, get really good at something, really understand the way the business operates, understand how the customers operate, because those ultimately are the people, if you wind up starting a business, you need to satisfy. So that's what I would say.
Got you. Get deep.
Yeah, get deep.
Awesome.
Early.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for
right.
coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. Thank you all for tuning into this week's episode and the first real episode of Tahoe Minds. And if you enjoyed it, go ahead and share with one or two friends who you think will really be interested in Mike's career. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, follow if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and follow all the socials at Tahoe Minds. All of the links will be in the description box below. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Mike.